He held up a printed map in front of everyone. Colored lines. Time stamps. My car. My routes. This, he said calmly, is where she goes when she says she's working late. We were at his sister's house. Sunday dinner. 12 people at the table. His mother froze with a serving spoon midair. His brother stared at his plate. No one stopped him. He tapped a red circle on the page. 2 hours here. Want to explain? I looked at the map. I looked at him. I didn't defend myself. I didn't speak. I just realized something simple. He thought he was in control. No one defended me that night. Not his mother. Not his brother. Not even my own friend who had come with us and sat 2 chairs away. They all watched the paper in his hand like it mattered more than the person sitting in front of them. He didn't shout. That would have been easier. He spoke slowly, like he was presenting evidence in a meeting. I just want honesty, he said. That word. Honesty. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. My pulse was steady. The red circle on the map marked a small commercial building downtown. A lawyer's office. He knew that. What he didn't know was why. His sister finally cleared her throat. Maybe this isn't the place. He smiled at her without looking away from me. It's exactly the place. Secrets grow in silence. That was the first time I understood the shape of what he was doing. This wasn't concern. It was performance. And the room chose convenience. No one asked why a husband would track his wife. No one asked how he had access to my movements. They just waited for me to defend myself. I didn't. After dinner, in the car, he kept his voice calm. If there's nothing going on, you shouldn't mind transparency. I looked out the window and watched the streetlights pass in steady rhythm. Transparency. He liked words that sounded reasonable. When we got home, I went to the garage before he could follow me. I checked under the wheel well again, even though I had already found the device days earlier. It was still there. Neatly attached. Confident. I had discovered it the week before during an oil change. The mechanic called me over quietly. You know this isn't standard, right? He asked. I had nodded like I already knew. I didn't remove it. I drove home and said nothing. Because this wasn't new behavior. This was escalation. For years, he had framed things as protection. He insisted on shared passwords. Said married couples shouldn't need privacy. He handled tax meetings because I was too busy. He liked knowing my schedule in detail. If I changed plans, he asked for updates. It had felt attentive. Gradually, it felt supervised. But every time I tried to create a boundary, he softened his tone. Why are you making this dramatic? He'd ask. And I would step back. Because he was good at making normal reactions look suspicious. That Sunday dinner wasn't about truth. It was about establishing narrative. He wanted witnesses. He wanted doubt planted in other people's minds before I ever had the chance to speak. And they let him. Later that night, I lay beside him in the dark. He slept easily. Even breathing. Certain. He believed the tracker gave him advantage. He believed public pressure would make me confess to something I hadn't done. What he didn't understand was this. I had been visiting that lawyer to protect myself. Not from another man. From him. It wasn't the first time he had built suspicion around me. It was just the first time he needed an audience. Years ago, before the money conversations ever started, he began with something smaller. Questions about my schedule. Not sharp. Not aggressive. Just curious. Why were you home late? Who was at that meeting? Why didn't you mention you stopped for coffee? At first I thought it was interest. Then I noticed something else. He rarely asked direct questions. He made statements instead. You've been distracted lately. You're secretive when you get stressed. You forget to include me. Each one designed to make me correct the narrative. So I would explain. I would over-explain. I would show him my calendar, my receipts, my messages. He would nod slowly, like he was assessing data. And the dynamic would reset. Except it didn't. It shifted. He started handling external communication. That's what he called it. He answered calls from our accountant. He replied to property management emails. He updated insurance contacts. It was efficient, he said. Less overwhelming for me. I let him. Because nothing looked wrong. Then came the passwords. He said married couples shouldn't need private accounts. I agreed. It sounded healthy. But when I once changed my email password after a phishing alert, he noticed within hours. Why didn't you tell me? He asked calmly. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Like I had failed a small test. I gave him the new password. That became normal. He would log in occasionally to check something. He would monitor credit reports to keep us safe. He downloaded copies of documents I didn't remember asking for. And every time I hesitated, he reframed it. Why does this make you uncomfortable? Are you hiding something? Trust goes both ways. Trust. He used that word carefully. Trust meant access. Trust meant compliance. Trust meant transparency only in one direction. He rarely volunteered his own details. When he came home late, he was tired. When he received calls outside, it was work. When he closed his laptop quickly, I assumed privacy. I didn't audit him. Because I wasn't suspicious. He built the imbalance slowly. Financially, it became more visible. He began suggesting small structural changes. Let's simplify the trust reporting. Let me be primary contact, just to speed things up. Sign here, it's procedural. I signed. Because nothing dramatic was happening. No raised voices. No threats. Just incremental adjustments. Then he began isolating me socially. Not directly. He would tell stories at gatherings. Stories where I was forgetful. Naive with numbers. Overly emotional about business. Always light-hearted. Always framed as affectionate teasing. People laughed. I laughed too. But the pattern had an effect. When financial conversations happened in group settings, eyes shifted toward him. Not me. He became the credible one. I became the protected one. That Sunday dinner with the printed map wasn't spontaneous. It was the result of years of positioning. He had already trained the room to see me as someone who needed oversight. So when he displayed the tracker, it didn't look insane. It looked concerned. He wasn't accusing me of an affair. He was implying instability. That was more dangerous. Because instability justifies control. Looking back, I see moments I ignored. The time he insisted on driving my car for a week to check the brakes. The time he asked detailed questions about my therapy appointment schedule, though I never told him where the office was located. The time he casually mentioned the parking lot of a building I hadn't discussed with him. I had brushed it off as coincidence. It wasn't. The tracker wasn't the beginning. It was confirmation. Confirmation that surveillance had shifted from digital to physical. From subtle to bold. And what unsettled me most wasn't the device itself. It was his certainty. He genuinely believed I would crumble under public pressure. He believed shame would push me into confession. Because historically, I had always tried to restore balance. To smooth over tension. To keep peace. He relied on that. But something changed the day I found the tracker. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Clarity. I stopped trying to earn fairness. I stopped trying to appear trustworthy. I realized something painful. In his narrative, I was not a partner. I was an asset that required supervision. And if I ever stepped outside the lines he drew, he would redraw them in public. The pattern was no longer deniable. This wasn't a jealous husband. This was a man constructing leverage. And leverage requires documentation. Which meant he believed he was collecting evidence. What he didn't understand was this. Evidence works both ways. And I had been quietly collecting my own. The boundary wasn't the tracker. It wasn't even the public humiliation. It happened 2 weeks later. He didn't know I had scheduled a private meeting with the estate attorney. I told him I had a lunch appointment with a friend. He nodded without looking up from his phone. The office was quiet. Neutral walls. Polished table. Legal calm. Mr. Avery had already reviewed the preliminary documents I'd sent him. He folded his hands and asked one simple question. Did you authorize your husband to request full structural breakdowns of your trust? No. I didn't. He turned his laptop toward me. There were emails. Multiple. From my husband's personal account. Professional tone. Measured language. Requesting projections in the event of spousal incapacitation. The phrase sat on the screen. Spousal incapacitation. I stared at it longer than I expected. Mr. Avery continued carefully. He has also inquired about emergency medical directives. Specifically, about decision authority if you were deemed temporarily unable to act. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not panic. Not fear. Recognition. He wasn't preparing for divorce. He was preparing for control under crisis. And that was the moment the air changed. Because suspicion is one thing. Preparation for your silence is another. I asked for print copies. I thanked Mr. Avery. I walked out of that building into bright daylight and sat in my car for a long time without turning the engine on. There is a specific kind of betrayal that doesn't feel explosive. It feels administrative. Calculated. Paper-based. You don't scream. You go quiet. That evening he came home with takeout from my favorite restaurant. He set it down on the counter and kissed my temple. I've been thinking, he said lightly, we should update our medical power of attorney. Just in case. My hand stopped moving. Just in case. The phrase echoed against what I had seen earlier that day. I looked at him carefully. His expression was normal. Relaxed. Certain. He believed he was ahead of me. That was the boundary. He was coordinating legal positioning without my knowledge. He was attempting to create a structure where, under the right circumstances, I would not control my own decisions. And he expected me to sign. Like always. Something closed inside me. Not emotionally. Logically. For years, I had tried to maintain connection. To soften edges. To give him the benefit of doubt. That night, I stopped. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I didn't reveal what I knew. Instead, I said, of course. That makes sense. And I watched relief move across his face. He mistook compliance for ignorance. That mistake would cost him. Over the next few days, he grew more confident. He asked casually about my schedule. He checked the car's location more frequently. I could tell because he would make comments about traffic delays I hadn't mentioned. He believed the system was working. But he didn't know I had already met with a different attorney. One who specialized in financial manipulation and coercive control. I didn't frame it as abuse. I framed it as risk management. He listened. He documented. He began building a file. Every email. Every request. Every inquiry about incapacitation. He explained something important. If someone is preparing legal pathways for control without transparency, intent matters. Intent. That word settled deeply. This was no longer about jealousy. It was about access. Access to assets. Access to decision-making. Access to my voice in the event I couldn't speak. And that was when I understood something clearly. I had been trying to preserve a marriage. He had been trying to preserve leverage. Those are not the same goal. The emotional shift didn't come with tears. It came with stillness. I stopped asking myself how to fix it. I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head. Instead, I began planning exits he wouldn't detect. Not dramatic exits. Structural ones. Because the truth is this. When someone prepares for your silence, you don't argue. You secure your voice. And that was the day I stopped trying to be chosen. I chose myself. I didn't expose him. That surprises people when they hear the outline of what happened. They expect drama. Police reports. Public collapse. There wasn't any. There was paperwork. 3 weeks after I met with the second attorney, the structure of my trust changed. Not visibly. Legally. Control shifted to an independent fiduciary. Medical power of attorney was reassigned. Emergency authority required 2 signatures. Asset liquidation clauses were tightened. Every pathway he had quietly inquired about was sealed. I didn't announce it. I let him believe we were still discussing updates casually. He even drafted a revised medical directive and left it on the kitchen counter for me to sign. I read it carefully. Then I told him I wanted to have my own lawyer review it. That was the first crack. His face didn't change immediately. But his breathing did. Slightly slower. Why? He asked. Just to be thorough, I said. Thorough. That word unsettled him. Because thorough meant independent. Within days, the tone shifted. He started checking in more frequently. Calling during the day. Asking where I was going. Asking why meetings were running long. The tracker still pinged location data. I left it in place. I drove to the attorney's office 3 more times. I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to feel certain I was predictable. Confidence makes people careless. The real exposure happened through his own impatience. He called the estate attorney directly one morning while I was home. He didn't know I was listening from the hallway. His voice was calm. I need confirmation that my access remains intact, he said. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted. What do you mean revised? Long silence. He ended the call abruptly. When he walked into the living room, his expression was composed but thin. Did you change something? He asked. I looked up from my book. Yes. What exactly? I secured what belongs to me. He stared at me for a long time. Not angry. Calculating. He realized something in that moment. The narrative had slipped. Public suspicion no longer mattered. He had lost procedural advantage. Over the next week, advisors began redirecting him. Calls required joint presence. Emails required written authorization. Access portals showed limited permissions. Nothing dramatic. Just barriers. He tried one more move. He scheduled a private meeting with the bank under the guise of restructuring debt. He assumed prior patterns would hold. They didn't. The compliance officer requested my confirmation before proceeding. I declined. Quietly. The request was documented. And that documentation changed things. Financial institutions become cautious when they detect unilateral positioning in marital estates. His reputation began to thin in professional circles. Not publicly destroyed. Just flagged. He noticed the shift before I did. Fewer returned calls. Shorter emails. Requests for clarification. It wasn't scandal. It was caution. And caution isolates. At home, he became restrained. Less confident. He stopped referencing the tracker. He removed it himself one afternoon. I saw him through the kitchen window, crouched beside the car, pulling it free. He didn't look at me afterward. 2 months later, he suggested we take space. He framed it as emotional misalignment. I didn't argue. I agreed. The legal separation filing was straightforward. The documentation I had collected prevented manipulation. There was no asset confusion. No emergency claims. No sudden incapacity narratives. Just facts. He had attempted structural control. I had restructured first. The day he moved out, the house felt different. Not empty. Clear. I walked through each room slowly. Nothing dramatic had happened. No yelling. No exposure posts. No revenge speeches. Just removal of leverage. That's what destroyed him. Not humiliation. Not accusation. Loss of access. Loss of narrative control. Loss of assumption. Months later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he had tried to describe me as paranoid. It didn't land. Because his own actions had already been recorded professionally. Documentation speaks louder than defense. I kept the printed map from that Sunday dinner. The one with red circles marking my movements. I don't keep it out of anger. I keep it as proof of something simple. He thought he was watching every stop. Every turn. Every secret. But while he was collecting coordinates, I was collecting evidence. And evidence doesn't shout. It waits. Now the house is quiet. The car is quiet. My phone is quiet. No tracking. No monitoring. No rehearsed explanations. Just space. And for the first time in years, that space belongs entirely to me.